Part 1: The Discovery. It was one of those perfect lazy Sundays where everything feels just right. Marie had left earlier in the day, cheerfully announcing her plans to meet with her book club. I didn't think much of it. This was her routine, and I respected how much she loved her little literary escapes. Besides, I had my own plans. A glorious afternoon of doing absolutely nothing. I sprawled out on the couch, tablet in hand, looking for some new gardening tools. I'd been obsessed with our backyard lately, turning it into a little oasis. As I was comparing prices on pruning shears, a notification popped up in the corner of the screen. It wasn't the usual type of notification, no Amazon deals or email spam. This was an alert from a platform I didn't recognize, one I was pretty sure we hadn't signed up for. Intrigued, I clicked on it, thinking it might have been one of those junk apps Marie accidentally downloaded. What greeted me wasn't junk, though. It was a profile. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. There was a picture of Marie, or at least someone who looked like her. She was wearing a dress I'd never seen before, smiling at the camera with a playful glint in her eye. But the username wasn't hers. And the posts? Well, they were explicit. My stomach sank as I scrolled further. This wasn't just an innocent account. The profile was filled with messages, videos, and exchanges with other people, other couples. The language was flirtatious and far too detailed to be a mistake. I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the tablet. I kept telling myself there had to be some logical explanation. Maybe this was a joke, a prank, a catfish situation. But the more I scrolled, the more undeniable it became. There was one video that sealed it for me. It was Marie, there was no mistaking it. She was laughing, tossing her hair back, and addressing someone behind the camera in a way that left no room for doubt. She was fully immersed in a world I had no idea she even knew existed. The sound of the clock ticking in our living room suddenly became unbearable. I stood up, pacing back and forth, staring at the tablet like it might catch fire. My mind raced. Was this why she'd been so secretive lately? Was this what her book club really was? How long had this been going on? I wanted to stop, to put the tablet down and pretend I hadn't seen anything. But curiosity, or maybe masochism, got the better of me. I opened her messages. There were threads with multiple people, intimate conversations that made my skin crawl. "Can't wait for our next meetup," one message read. "Last time was unforgettable." Unforgettable. I sat down, my knees buckling beneath me. How could something like this have been happening under my nose? I stared at her wedding ring on the nightstand. It felt mocking now, a cruel reminder of the life I thought we'd built together. As the clock ticked closer to the time she'd be home, I tried to figure out what the hell I was going to do. Would I confront her? Stay silent? Could I even look her in the eye after this? The front door creaked open a little before 6 p.m. Marie's voice rang out cheerfully. "Hey Han." Book club ran late. They couldn't stop debating the ending of the book. Her casual tone felt like a slap in the face. I stood frozen in the hallway, clutching the tablet like it was evidence in a crime. My heart pounded as I watched her kick off her shoes and drop her purse on the counter. She glanced up, finally noticing me, and smiled. But her smile faltered when she saw the look on my face. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice laced with confusion and concern. I held up the tablet. "Who are you, Marie?" Her expression shifted instantly. The color drained from her face, and her hands trembled as she reached for the counter to steady herself. It was as though the weight of her secret had physically hit her. I didn't think I was ready for the truth, but there was no going back now. Part 2: The Confrontation. Marie froze like a deer caught in headlights, her hand still gripping the counter for support. For a moment it was like time stopped. Her mouth opened but no words came out. The silence between us felt like a chasm, and I wasn't sure if I wanted her to explain or just confirm my worst fears outright. "What do you mean?" she finally managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. I held up the tablet again, the screen still glowing with one of her messages. I didn't trust myself to speak yet. My pulse was pounding so loudly in my ears it drowned out everything else. Slowly, I placed the tablet on the counter and slid it toward her. She glanced down, her eyes darting over the screen. Her reaction was instant, her shoulders slumped, and she let out a shaky breath. I can explain," she said. But her voice wavered, and it wasn't convincing. "Explain?" I asked, my voice sharp enough to cut through the tension. "Explain what, Marie? That you've been sneaking around behind my back? That your book club is some kind of cover story? That our marriage is a complete lie?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't in the mood for sympathy. It's not what you think, she said, shaking her head. I never meant for you to find out like this. Find out what? I snapped, my voice rising. That my wife is living some secret life with other couples? That you've been lying to me every time you walked out that door with your book and your fake smile? She flinched at my words, her tears spilling over now. Please just let me explain, she begged, her voice cracking. Then explain, Marie, I said, my voice firm. I'm all ears. What followed was a confession that I was entirely unprepared for. She admitted that it had started over 2 years ago. It wasn't planned, she said, wringing her hands. At first, it was just harmless flirting in a chat room. I was bored, lonely. I don't know. I never thought it would go anywhere. Harmless. I scoffed, my anger boiling over. You call this harmless? I gestured at the tablet, where explicit messages and videos were just a few swipes away. Her voice broke as she continued. I didn't know how to stop. It was like this escape from everything. From the stress, the monotony, the monotony of our life together? I interrupted, my voice filled with bitterness. The life we built? The vows we took? She winced like my words physically hurt her. It wasn't about you, she said desperately. It was never about you. I love you, I swear. This was just something separate. Something I thought I could keep hidden and never let interfere with us. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Separate? I echoed. You think you can compartmentalize something like this? You think I'm just going to accept that my wife has been sneaking off to meet other people, sharing parts of herself that should only belong to me, and call it separate? Her face crumpled as she tried to respond, but the words wouldn't come. She looked so small, so broken, but all I could feel was anger and betrayal. Why, Marie? I demanded. Why wasn't I enough? It wasn't about you not being enough, she whispered. It was me. I felt trapped, like I was losing myself. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to hurt you. Well, congratulations, I said coldly. You've done a bang-up job of that. We stood there in silence for what felt like an eternity, the weight of her betrayal hanging heavy in the air. Finally, she said, I want to fix this. I'll stop, I swear. I'll delete everything, cut ties with everyone. Please just give me a chance to make it right. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. You want me to believe that? After everything you've hidden from me, after all the lies? How can I ever trust you again, Marie? She stepped closer, reaching for my hand, but I pulled away. I'll do whatever it takes, she said, her voice trembling. Therapy, counseling, anything. Just don't walk away from us. Please. I stared at her, at the woman I thought I knew so well. I wanted to scream, to break something, to lash out and make her feel even a fraction of the pain she'd caused me. But instead I just stood there, frozen, my mind racing with questions I didn't even know how to ask. Give me time, I finally said, my voice flat. I need to figure out if there's anything left to save. Marie nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand, she said softly. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the kitchen, her sobs echoing behind me. Upstairs, I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the framed photo of us from our honeymoon. I had no idea what was real anymore. No idea how we'd gotten here, or if we could ever find our way back. Part 3, The Explanation. The next day, Marie and I sat across from each other in the living room, the air between us thick with tension. She had barely slept, her face puffy and red from crying. I wasn't doing much better, but my anger had morphed into something colder. Disbelief, maybe even numbness. I needed answers, but I wasn't sure I was ready to hear them. Start from the beginning, I said, my voice low but firm. No half-truths, no excuses. Just tell me everything. Marie hesitated, staring down at her hands. Her wedding ring glinted in the sunlight streaming through the window, a cruel reminder of the life we'd promised to share. After a long pause, she began to speak. It was about 2 years ago, she said quietly. I was scrolling online one night while you were working late. I don't even remember how I ended up in that chat room. It wasn't something I was looking for. It just happened. I clenched my fists. Things like that don't just happen, Marie. You made a choice. She flinched but nodded. You're right. I did. At first it was just silly, harmless stuff. People flirting, joking around. I didn't think it meant anything. Harmless, I repeated bitterly. She pushed on, her voice trembling. It felt good, okay? To be seen, to be wanted. I didn't realize how much I missed that feeling. And then someone invited me to this group. They called it a community. It was all very low-key at first, just chatting, sharing stories. I thought it was innocent. I scoffed. Innocent? Is that what you call what I saw on that profile? Those videos? Those messages? Her eyes filled with tears again, but she didn't look away. It didn't start like that, she said. At first it was just conversations. People venting about their marriages, their frustrations, their lives. It felt safe, like a place where I could be honest about things I didn't even know I needed to say. And then, I pressed. She swallowed hard. And then I met someone, a couple actually. They were kind, funny, easy to talk to. We started chatting more privately. It was exciting in a way I hadn't felt in years. They invited me to meet them in person. My stomach turned. And you went. She nodded, shame written all over her face. I told myself I wouldn't do anything. I just wanted to see what it was like to feel that spark again. But when I got there it was intoxicating. They made me feel like a different person, like I wasn't just Marie the wife. I was someone else, someone free. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So what? You decided our marriage wasn't enough for you, and you went out looking for thrills? Do you have any idea how that makes me feel? She buried her face in her hands. I do now. God, I hate myself for it. I thought I could keep it separate, that it wouldn't affect us. I didn't realize how far it would go, how much I was risking. My jaw tightened. How far did it go, Marie? How many times? How many people? She hesitated, and that pause was answer enough. There were a few couples, she admitted. But it wasn't just about the physical stuff. It was the connection, the escape. I know that sounds selfish. Selfish doesn't even begin to cover it, I snapped. You betrayed me, Marie. Over and over again. And for what? A thrill? A little excitement? Was I really that terrible? No, she said quickly, her voice cracking. It was never about you. You've always been good to me, better than I deserved. This was my failure, my weakness. I didn't know how to ask for what I needed, so I went looking for it somewhere else. I was stupid, and I'm so sorry. I leaned back, running a hand through my hair. I wanted to scream, to yell, to make her feel the depth of my pain. But all I could manage was a quiet. Why didn't you just talk to me? Her lip trembled. I didn't know how. I was scared. I thought you'd think I was broken, or worse, that you'd leave me. And now? I asked bitterly. What do you think now, Marie? After everything you've done, do you really think we can just go back to the way things were? She looked down, her tears falling freely. No, she said softly. I know I've destroyed the trust between us, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this, to fix us. Therapy, counseling, anything. Just please don't give up on me. Don't give up on us. Her words hung in the air, a plea wrapped in desperation. I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know what I felt anymore. Anger, betrayal, sadness. It was all tangled together in a knot I couldn't unravel. I don't know if I can, I said finally. Not yet. I need time, Marie. Time to figure out if this is something we can even come back from. She nodded, her face crumpling. Take all the time you need, she whispered. I stood up, the weight of the conversation pressing down on me. As I walked out of the room, her quiet sobs followed me like a ghost. Upstairs, I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the wedding photo on the dresser. The smiling couple in the picture felt like strangers now. Was this the beginning of the end? Or could something still be salvaged from the wreckage? I didn't have the answers yet, but I knew one thing for sure. Nothing would ever be the same again. Part 4, the aftermath. The days that followed felt like walking through a fog. I went to work, I came home, I ate meals, but none of it felt real. It was like the foundation of my life had been yanked out from under me. And I was still falling, waiting to hit bottom. Marie tiptoed around me, as if afraid that one wrong move might shatter whatever fragile thread was keeping us tethered. Nights were the worst. The silence in our bedroom was deafening. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, reliving every moment of our relationship. Every laugh, every kiss, every promise. Had it all been a lie? Had she been living this double life from the start? Marie tried to engage with me, but I couldn't meet her halfway. Every time she spoke, I saw flashes of the messages on that tablet, the videos, the images of her smiling, laughing, and living a life I wasn't a part of. It made my skin crawl. One night, a few days after her confession, I came home late from work. I'd been staying at the office longer than usual, trying to avoid the house. As I opened the front door, the smell of freshly baked cookies hit me, Marie's peace offering. She was in the kitchen, nervously wiping her hands on a towel. Hi, she said softly, offering me a tentative smile. I didn't respond. Instead, I hung up my coat and sat at the dining table. She brought over a plate of cookies and set it down in front of me. I stared at them, unmoving. "Look," she began, her voice trembling. "I know I can't fix this overnight. I know I've hurt you in ways I'll never be able to take back. But I want to try, even if it takes the rest of my life. I'm so sorry, and I'll do anything to make this right." I looked up at her, my chest tight. "You don't get it, do you?" I said, my voice cold. "You can't just bake cookies and expect things to go back to normal." Her face crumpled, but I couldn't stop. The dam had broken. "Do you even understand what you've done to me? To us? You didn't just betray me, Marie. You made a fool out of me. Every time I think about you with them, laughing, touching, doing God knows what, it makes me sick. How am I supposed to move past that? How am I supposed to trust you again?" She sat down across from me, tears streaming down her face. "I don't have all the answers," she admitted. "I know I can't undo what I've done. But I love you and I want to fight for us. Please tell me what I can do." "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't even know if there's an us to fight for anymore." She broke down, her sobs filling the room. I wanted to comfort her, but I couldn't bring myself to reach out. I felt hollow, like all the love and warmth I'd once had for her had been drained away. The next day Marie brought up counseling. "We can't do this alone," she said, her voice pleading. "If there's even a sliver of a chance to save our marriage, we need help." I didn't want to go. The thought of sitting in a room and airing our dirty laundry to a stranger made me sick. But deep down I knew she was right. If I didn't try, I'd always wonder if we could have salvaged something from the wreckage. Our first session was awkward and painful. The therapist, a calm and composed woman named Dr. Ellis, asked us to talk about why we were there. I stayed silent, letting Marie take the lead. She laid it all out, her feelings of boredom and isolation, her mistakes, her shame. It was hard to hear, but I couldn't deny the raw honesty in her voice. When it was my turn to speak, I struggled to find the words. "I feel betrayed," I said finally. "Like I was living in a different reality than she was. I don't even know who she is anymore. And I don't know if I can ever trust her again." Dr. Ellis nodded, her expression sympathetic. "That's a valid and normal response," she said. "Rebuilding trust takes time. And it's a process that requires effort from both of you. But the fact that you're here, that you're willing to have this conversation, is a good first step." After the session, Marie seemed hopeful, but I was less optimistic. The pain was still too fresh, the betrayal too raw. I couldn't shake the image of her with those other couples, living a life I'd been excluded from. At home, I started sleeping in the guest room. I told myself it was temporary, that I just needed space. But part of me wondered if this was the beginning of a permanent separation. Marie tried to show me she was serious about changing. She deleted her profiles, blocked the people she'd been involved with, and even handed me her phone so I could see for myself. She signed up for individual therapy to work through her own issues. Despite all this, I couldn't let go of the nagging doubt in the back of my mind. Was she really done with that life? Or was this just another act, a performance to keep me from walking away? Every now and then, I'd catch her staring at me with a mixture of hope and fear, as if waiting for me to decide her fate. I didn't have the heart to tell her that I wasn't sure if I could ever forgive her. The house felt like a battlefield, with moments of calm punctuated by waves of tension. We were two people trying to find our way back to each other, but the path was littered with landmines. I had no idea if we'd make it through, or if we'd end up as just another casualty of broken trust. All I knew was that the road ahead would be long, and I wasn't sure if I had the strength to walk it. Part 5: The Decision. The months that followed were a strange mix of progress and stagnation. Marie threw herself into fixing things. Therapy sessions, self-help books, even journaling about her thoughts and feelings. She swore she was done with her secret life, but the question of whether I believed her lingered like a heavy cloud between us. Our couple's therapy sessions became a weekly ritual. First, I resented going. I sat through those sessions like a statue, arms crossed, answering in monosyllables while Marie poured her heart out. But slowly I began to engage. Dr. Ellis had a way of cutting through the noise, forcing us to confront the things we'd buried. "You keep saying you don't trust her," she said one session, looking directly at me. "But have you thought about what it would take for you to rebuild that trust? Or is part of you holding on to this pain because it's easier than risking vulnerability again?" Her words hit me harder than I wanted to admit. Was I clinging to my anger because it was safer than facing the possibility of being hurt again? At home, Marie was trying in her own way. She started planning us activities, dinners, movie nights, even a weekend trip to the cabin we used to visit every fall. But those moments, while nice, felt like band-aids on a gaping wound. One night, after a particularly exhausting session with Dr. Ellis, Marie asked me to sit with her in the living room. She looked nervous, wringing her hands like she was bracing for another confrontation. "I've been thinking a lot," she said quietly, "about everything. And I need to say something, even if it's hard for you to hear." I nodded, wary. "Go on." She took a deep breath. "I know I've hurt you in ways I can never fully undo, and I know you might never look at me the same way again. But I need you to know that I'm not that person anymore. I don't want to be her. I've been working on myself not just for you but for me, because I hate the choices I made and I hate who I became." Her voice cracked and she paused to steady herself. "But I also know that you're still here. You haven't left. And that gives me hope. So I need to ask you, do you think we can ever move forward? Do you think we can find a way to build something new, even if it's different from what we had before?" Her question hung in the air, heavy and loaded. I didn't answer right away. I stared at the floor, my mind racing with conflicting thoughts. Part of me wanted to say yes, to believe that love could conquer even the deepest betrayals. But another part of me wasn't sure if I could ever fully let go of the hurt. Finally, I looked up at her. "I don't know," I admitted. "I want to believe we can. But it's not just about wanting it. It's about whether we can actually do it. Whether I can look at you and not see all of that." Her face crumpled and tears spilled down her cheeks. "I understand," she whispered. "I just need you to know that I'm here. No matter how long it takes, I'll wait. I'll do whatever it takes." Her words stayed with me long after she'd gone to bed. I sat in the dark living room, replaying our conversation in my mind. Did I still love her? Yes, I did. That much I was sure of. But love felt like a fragile thing now. Something that could shatter at the slightest touch. The next morning I woke up to find Marie sitting at the kitchen table, a stack of papers in front of her. She looked up as I entered, her eyes puffy but determined. "What's this?" I asked, gesturing to the papers. "Everything," she said simply. "My journal entries, my thoughts, everything I've been working on in therapy. I wanted to show you to prove that I'm serious about this. About us." I sat down, flipping through the pages. They were raw, filled with her fears, regrets, and hopes. It was like getting a glimpse into her soul. And for the first time I saw how much pain she was carrying too, pain that she had caused, yes, but also pain that she was desperately trying to heal from. "I don't expect you to forgive me overnight," she said. "I just want you to see that I'm trying." I nodded, my throat tight. "I see that," I said quietly. That evening I made a decision. I didn't know if it was the right one, but it was the only one that felt honest. When Marie came downstairs, I handed her the journal. "I'll stay," I said simply. "But we're taking this one day at a time. No promises, no guarantees. Just one day at a time." Her face lit up with a mixture of relief and gratitude. She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "One day at a time." And so we began the slow, painful process of rebuilding. I didn't know where the road would lead us, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. Part 6. The Crossroads. Months passed, and life settled into a cautious rhythm. Marie and I were like two actors on a stage, performing the roles of husband and wife while the weight of her betrayal lingered in the shadows. Some days it felt almost normal, like we were finding our way back to each other. Other days the slightest thing would set me off. A notification on her phone, a passing comment that reminded me of what she'd done. Marie was relentless in her efforts to rebuild my trust. She kept her phone unlocked and left it lying around like an open book. She deleted her social media accounts, blocked the people from her past, and made a point to check in with me constantly. "How are you feeling?" she'd ask, her voice gentle but unsure. I could see she was walking on eggshells, afraid of pushing too hard or not enough. I appreciated the effort, but I couldn't ignore the lingering doubt. There were nights when I'd stare at the ceiling, wondering if she was really done with that life, or if she was just better at hiding it now. Trust, I was learning, wasn't something you could rebuild overnight. It was a fragile thing, and every crack in its foundation made it harder to stand on. One evening after dinner, Marie suggested we go through old photo albums. "Remember this?" she said, holding up a picture of us at the beach, our faces sunburned but grinning. "We built that sandcastle that collapsed 5 minutes later." I forced a laugh, but the memory felt distant, like it belonged to another life. I wanted to feel that connection again, to look at her and see the woman I fell in love with, not the one who had lied to me. But I wasn't there yet. Our progress in therapy was slow but steady. Dr. Ellis had us work on communication, encouraging us to voice our fears and needs without judgment. One session, Marie turned to me, her eyes filled with guilt. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," she said, her voice trembling. "But I need you to know how much I love you. I can't change the past, but I want to spend the rest of my life making it up to you." I nodded, unsure of what to say. Forgiveness felt like a mountain I didn't know how to climb. One afternoon, while cleaning out the garage, I stumbled upon a box of keepsakes from our early years. Inside were letters we'd written to each other when we were dating, ticket stubs from movies we'd seen, and a photo of us from our first anniversary. In the picture, Marie was looking at me with so much love, it made my chest ache. I sat there for a long time staring at the photo. What happened to that version of us? Was it gone forever, or could we somehow find our way back? That night I showed Marie the photo. She smiled wistfully, running her fingers over the image. "I remember that day," she said. "You surprised me with that picnic, and I accidentally spilled wine all over your shirt." "Yeah," I said, my voice soft. "You laughed so hard you started crying." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I miss that," she said. "I miss us." "So do I," I admitted. That was the first time in months that I felt a spark of something real. A glimmer of the love we used to share. But the doubt never fully went away. A few weeks later, I noticed Marie seemed distracted. She was on her phone more often, her expressions guarded. My chest tightened as old fears resurfaced. Was she slipping back into old habits? One evening, while she was in the shower, I gave in to temptation and checked her phone. My hand shook as I scrolled through her messages, half expecting to find something damning. But there was nothing. Just conversations with her therapist, a group chat with her friends, and notes about our next therapy session. I felt a wave of guilt crash over me. She was trying, really trying, and here I was sabotaging her efforts with my own paranoia. Later that night, I confessed what I'd done. Marie didn't get angry. Instead, she looked at me with a mix of sadness and understanding. "I get it," she said quietly. "I've given you every reason not to trust me. But I hope someday you'll believe that I'm not that person anymore." Her words stuck with me. I realized that if I wanted us to move forward, I had to meet her halfway. Our turning point came during an impromptu road trip. We'd been arguing that morning. Something trivial that spiraled into a rehashing of old wounds. Frustrated, I suggested we go for a drive just to clear the air. We ended up at a quiet lakeside spot we used to visit when we were younger. As we sat by the water, the tension between us began to melt away. We talked for hours, not just about the past but about our hopes for the future. For the first time in a long time, it felt like we were on the same page. "I know I can't erase what I did," Marie said, her voice steady. "But I want to build something new with you, something better. If you'll let me." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the woman I'd fallen in love with. She wasn't perfect, neither of us were, but she was trying. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. "We'll see," I said, a small smile tugging at my lips. "One day at a time." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold, I felt something shift inside me. The road ahead would still be rocky, but for the first time I felt like we were walking it together.